Today, we are taking a long, hard look at a figure whose life story is just so extreme, so steeped in violence and contradiction, that it's almost hard to believe he was real.
Absolutely.
We are diving into the sources surrounding Pedro Rodrigues Filho, the man everyone knows as Pedrinho Matador, Little Peter the Killer.
And when you actually look at the numbers, I mean, they are frankly terrifying. Pedrinho is documented as Brazil's most prolific serial killer.
Right.
Confirmed to have committed at least 71 murders, though, he himself boasted the actual count was well over 100.
Over 100.
He spent, over 4 decades behind bars, stacked up a sentence that got close to 400 years.
But what makes this deep dive, I think, really essential is this profound paradox at the very heart of his story. This man, a mass murderer by any definition, somehow gained this international notoriety and a really strange kind of quasi-hero status.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
Why? Because his victims were almost exclusively other criminals. We're talking rapists, murderers, drug dealers, prison traders. He saw himself as a sort of vindicator.
And he was, the documented inspiration for the fictional character Dexter Morgan, which tells you a lot about his cultural impact.
It really does. So our mission today is to chronologically trace this descent into violence. We need to start with the trauma that clearly shaped him, go through his bloody rise on the streets, his reign as a prison predator, and then, well, right up to his frankly bizarre second act as a Christian YouTube star.
Yeah, and I think we really need to understand the social context too. The failures that might allow a figure like Pedrinho to become this kind of cultural icon in Brazil.
Okay, so to understand the almost relentless, self-justifying violence that really defined Pedrinho Matador, we have to go back. Back in 1954 in Santa Rita do Sapucaí, Minas Gerais.
Right.
And the very beginning of his life, a beginning marked by, injury before he was even born.
Yeah. The origins of his trauma are immediate and shocking. The sources are pretty clear that Pedro Rodrigues Filho was born with a severe skull injury.
Inflicted before birth.
Exactly. It wasn't a birth defect. It was a wound. Inflicted because his father, during a moment of just intense domestic violence, repeatedly kicked his pregnant mother in the belly.
Oh my God.
So he literally sustained serious violence before he even entered the world. Violence was just baked into his existence from day one.
It's just an unbelievable detail. And his childhood, well, it reflected that environment, didn't it?
Completely. Life defined by extreme poverty and the constant sort of routine volatile violence between his parents.
Yeah.
The sources show he developed this very quick, very brutal kind of pragmatic philosophy for survival. He apparently believed that, quote, to move, try not to argue.
What does that even mean, to move, try not to argue?
I think he understood really quickly that the time you spend arguing is time you could be attacked. So for him, conflict resolution became about immediate, decisive, and usually final action.
And this internal logic, it boiled over really young.
Yeah, incredibly young. He was just 14 years old. His father, ironically, was working as a security guard at a school, but he got fired by the deputy mayor.
Okay.
The official accusation was that he'd stolen food from the school kitchen, food meant for the students.
For a family already struggling, that must have been
Devastating. The loss of income, plus the shame of the accusation, it was huge.
And this is where we see that vigilante mindset just fully form. The 14-year-old Pedrinho decides the deputy mayor is the source of his family's problems, their hunger.
So what does he do? He steals his grandfather's shotgun, waits outside the town hall, and executes the deputy mayor, just like that.
But crucially, he didn't stop there, did he? That's the key part.
Exactly. That's the key. If he'd stopped at the deputy mayor, you might just call it, teenage revenge against authority. Misguided, violent, but maybe understandable in a twisted way.
Right.
But Pedrinho's logic was already more refined, if you can call it that. He hunted down the coworker he suspected of being the real thief.
The one who framed his dad.
The man he thought framed his father and caused the job loss. He tracked that man down and killed him too.
Wait, let me just pause on that.
Yeah.
At 14, he'd already established this dual mandate in his head. Punish the perceived system, the official who handed out the punishment.
Right.
And punish the actual perceived wrongdoer, the thief. This wasn't just blind rage, it was targeted, decisive, a violent affirmation that he could deliver justice where he thought the system failed.
That's absolutely right. And, having left 2 bodies behind him at age 14, his life in Santa Rita do Sapucaí was obviously over. He fled home, never went back, and basically launched himself onto this path defined by constant running and just escalate in violence.
So the next stage of his life takes him to Mogi das Cruzes.
Yeah.
That's a much larger, more dangerous area near Sao Paulo. Right?
Much larger, yeah. He's a young fugitive now, hunted. He starts operating in the dark corners of the criminal underworld. But the sources indicate he quickly carved out this unique niche for himself, something that set him apart from just common thugs. Well, he transitioned from general delinquency, petty stuff, to targeting criminals exclusively. He specialized in what some sources called a black-on-black operation.
Black on black.
Meaning he was robbing drug dens, trafficking spots, and killing the dealers he found there. He wasn't, robbing banks or mugging ordinary folks. He was preying specifically on the ecosystem of organized crime itself.
What's the significance of that, though? Why did robbing criminals instead of civilians give him this reputation that the media eventually latched onto?
Well, first off, it was incredibly risky. I mean, when you rob a drug trafficker, you're basically signing your own death warrant, right?
Sure.
That person has the means, the motive, the network to retaliate immediately and brutally. But more importantly, by robbing and crucially eliminating these figures, he was seen, paradoxically, as kind of serving a public good.
Cleaning up the streets.
Yeah, cleaning up the streets the police couldn't or wouldn't touch. This is where that nickname, Pedrinho Matador, Little Peter the Killer, really originated and stuck. The media saw the pattern and, well, they sensationalized it.
Okay. But even living this incredibly volatile life, he found a moment of connection, briefly.
He did. A brief, fragile moment. He met Maria Aparecida Olympia, known as Botinha.
Botinha.
Yeah. And she was already linked to this world, actually. She was the widow of a drug trafficker.
Right.
But they fell in love. He even tattooed her name on his arm. They moved in together. And soon, she became pregnant. This must have been the closest he ever got to anything resembling a normal life.
But it didn't last.
It was a moment of light, definitely. But in that criminal universe, that kind of vulnerability, that connection, it was immediately catastrophic. Botinha became a target.
Not because of anything she did.
No, purely because of her association with Pedrinho. A rival gang leader, wanting to settle scores with Pedrinho, decided to strike at his only apparent weakness, his family.
The sources describe what happened to Botinha as just unthinkable.
They reveal absolute brutality. Botinha was murdered, tortured, and then horrifically dismembered.
Oh, God.
The destruction of this tiny, fragile family unit, it just ignited this level of rage and cold, calculated vengeance in Pedrinho that honestly defined the rest of his life. He didn't just grieve, he declared war.
And this wasn't just like one act of revenge for her death.
No. This was a systematic campaign. He hunted down every single person involved in her murder.
What details do the sources offer about how relentless he was? I mean, how did he even find them all?
He was apparently meticulous. He tracked, tortured, and executed every single individual connected to it, ensuring, they suffered the same fate or worse.
And this campaign culminated in something legendary.
It did, an event that's still talked about in Brazilian true crime circles. He found out the gang leader who orchestrated Botinha's murder was attending his sister's wedding party.
Wow.
This wasn't the kind of target Pedrinho was going to leave for another day.
So he turns a wedding party into a battlefield.
That's exactly what happened. Pedrinho, with 4 accomplices, crashed the event. And it wasn't some quiet drive-by. It was an intense, fierce gun battle. Must have been terrifying for everyone there.
The outcome.
When the fighting stopped, the gang leader was dead, along with 6 other people. And 16 guests were severely wounded. He had, essentially, in one night, wiped out the entire gang responsible for Botinha's death.
And the craziest part,
he was still technically a minor. He hadn't even turned 18 yet.
Unbelievable. And the sources suggest the authorities, they weren't exactly outraged by this huge public gunfight.
Well, there was this bizarre kind of pragmatism about it, it seems. Some were apparently quite content with the cleanup.
Seriously?
Yeah, the fact that a known violent gang was completely eliminated by this younger rogue killer, it spoke volumes about the state's lack of control in those areas.
So Pedrinho basically served as this extremely brutal, efficient, and totally extrajudicial form of, urban renewal.
In a very dark way, yes. That's how some perceived it. So just as Pedrinho's life is becoming laser-focused on this street vengeance, the initial trauma, the root of it all, it resurfaces in the most horrific way possible.
Setting the stage for what really became the defining act of his legend, right? The patricide.
Exactly. While he was on the run, hunting down gang leaders, his father, the man who kicked his pregnant mother and later got framed for theft,
Yeah.
he took his own rage to the absolute limit. In a drunken frenzy, he murdered Pedro's mother.
Oh.
And the details in the source material are almost unbearable, but they're critical to understanding Pedro's motivation. The father used a machete. He inflicted 21 blows and then dismembered her body. He was, of course, arrested and imprisoned for it.
For Pedro, who, despite everything, seems to have had some reverence for his mother, this must have been the ultimate betrayal.
Absolutely. His father wasn't just an abusive parent anymore. He'd crossed the line. He was now in the category Pedro hated most. A traitor and a violent criminal who had harmed someone innocent.
And he made a vow.
He did. Apparently right over his mother's coffin, he swore he would get revenge.
And this vow became chillingly relevant very quickly.
Almost immediately. Because in May 1973, Pedro himself was finally arrested. He was 18 by then. And imagine his shock, or maybe, his sense of dark fate when he's processed into the prison system.
And finds his father there.
And discovers his father is incarcerated in the exact same facility. The opportunity to fulfill that vow was literally handed to him.
The way he carried it out. It was calculated, wasn't it?
Very calculated. He didn't use a gun, obviously. He managed to get hold of a large knife, a pacera. And his own account of what happened next is what cemented this act into national legend.
What did he claim?
He claimed he managed to get access to his father's cell, reportedly by bribing a guard, though who knows. And he proceeded with this meticulous, almost numerical act of retribution.
How many times?
He stabbed his father 22 times, one more than the 21 blows his mother had received.
Wow, like balancing the scales in his mind.
Exactly. An act of balanced, definitive justice, according to his own twisted logic.
But the detail that truly solidified his monstrous reputation, the one that gets reported everywhere.
Ah, yes, that's the detail. He claimed to have cut out his father's heart.
Right.
Then, in this incredibly symbolic, visceral display of pure revenge, he said he chewed a piece of it.
He chewed it.
Chewed a piece, then threw the rest back onto the corpse. He stated later this was the only true way to satisfy the debt. Pure revenge.
Okay, now this is where we have to pause and look at the sources carefully, because this particular act is so barbaric, it feels almost mythic.
It does, and there is a conflict. One serious researcher, Ulysses Campbell, later investigated and suggested that the father might have actually died years later, still in prison, but from a respiratory illness. Not directly by Pedro's hand in that manner.
So the heart-chewing story might not be literally true.
It might not be. But, and this is absolutely key, despite that potential factual discrepancy, it is Pedro's own graphic, widely reported account of the 22 stabs and the heart-chewing that became the established truth. That's what entered the public consciousness and defined his legend.
And that's the powerful point, isn't it? Whether it happened exactly like that or not, the story itself was necessary for the legend.
Precisely. It demonstrated this absolute, uncompromising commitment to his code of vengeance. It showed everyone he wasn't just capable of killing a murderer, but capable of doing it with this symbolic intensity that went way beyond simple homicide. It made him terrifyingly unique.
So Pedro's life of violence certainly didn't end once he was formally locked up. In fact, you could say prison just became his most concentrated hunting ground.
Oh, absolutely. He basically signaled his intentions immediately, like day one.
What happened?
May 24th, 1973. The day he's being transported. He's just 18, newly arrested. He's in a police van with two other criminals, a common thief and a convicted rapist. Even while handcuffed, Pedro somehow managed to strangle the rapist, right there in the van.
While handcuffed, he strangled him.
That's the account. It was an immediate, chilling declaration of his code. Confinement wasn't going to save you if you violated his rules, especially if you were a rapist.
What did the police do?
They found the rapist dead, and the thief was reportedly just screaming in terror, suddenly realizing exactly who he was sharing that confined space with.
Wow. So prison then became his operational theater for the next, 4 decades?
42 years, yeah. He's surrounded by the very types of criminals he'd already been hunting on the outside, rapists, traitors, gang leaders, and his killing just escalated exponentially inside.
He killed how many inmates?
At least 47 fellow inmates. Confirmed. These were crimes committed while incarcerated that just kept piling up his sentence, from an initial 128 years to nearly 400.
But he wasn't just killing randomly in there, was he? He had specific targets again.
Always specific targets. It reflected that vindicator mindset. He consistently went after rapists and traitors, guys who collaborated with authorities or, harmed their own kind in some way he deemed unacceptable.
He gave an example, didn't he?
Yeah, he chillingly recounted beheading an inmate who had apparently murdered his own sister. Pedro said something like, he was my friend, but I had to kill him.
His justification was always the same.
Always the same. They were people who were no good, and in his view, they deserved to be purged from the system. He was cleaning house, basically.
Which meant he spent decades in this state of just perpetual combat inside prison.
Absolutely. His stated method, his modus operandi, usually involved a knife, but he also claimed, efficiency, even stating he'd broken the necks of about 10 people.
And he had that tattoo, right? Mato por prazer.
Yeah, I kill for pleasure, which seems to directly contradict his whole stated motivation of anger and revenge, not bloodlust.
So which was it? Pleasure or revenge?
That tension is central, isn't it? The tattoo suggests pure sadism, but he always insisted the real drive was anger, retribution, enforcing his twisted moral code. Maybe it was both. Either way, the result was the same. He was a constant lethal threat, and his sheer notoriety became a kind of survival mechanism in itself.
And he proved he could survive in the toughest environments.
Definitely. He was a central figure in a major prison rebellion back in 1985. 4 inmates died in that one. He was eventually transferred to the Taubaté Penitentiary, one of the most secure facilities in São Paulo, specifically because other prisons just couldn't control him.
And even there, he faced threats.
Oh, yeah. His status was absolutely cemented when he survived a massive ambush in Taubaté. 5 gang members attacked him all at once, trying to end his reign of terror inside.
Oh.
He didn't just survive, he managed to kill 3 of his attackers.
You survive an ambush by 5 hardened gang members in max security and kill 3 of them. Your legend isn't just rumor anymore. It's terrifying reality.
He became the most feared and, in a twisted way, maybe even respected prisoner in the entire system.
Which brings us to the professional analysis of his behavior. Psychiatrists looked at him.
They did, back in 1982. They evaluated him, and the diagnosis was paranoid character and antisociality. They concluded his main motivation wasn't profit or even simple sadism. His entire life seemed driven by, quote, the violent affirmation of the self.
Okay, let's unpack that psych term, violent affirmation of the self. What does that actually mean in Pedro's context?
It basically means that his sense of self-worth, his identity, maybe even his feeling of existing, was entirely tied to his capacity to assert his violent code. Every time he killed someone he deemed guilty, he wasn't just punishing them, he was affirming his own sense of moral superiority, his own power, his own reason for being. It was about defining himself through the elimination of others.
And criminologist Ilana Casoy, who you mentioned earlier, she labeled him a vindicator. That label really seems to connect his personal psychopathy to the wider social situation in Brazil, doesn't it?
Absolutely, because the reason he became so fascinating to the public, why he became this sort of dark comic book hero, was precisely because his vigilante actions targeted the exact criminals, the rapists, the high-level drug dealers, that the Brazilian justice system often seemed utterly incapable of holding accountable.
The failure rate is staggering.
The sources highlight that in Brazil, something like only 10% of homicides are ever actually solved. That creates this massive vacuum of justice.
And when the state fails 90% of the time, a violent figure who succeeds in killing the people everyone agrees are guilty, however brutally, well, he can gain this bizarre kind of public fascination, even affection.
But Casoy rightly pointed out the fundamental flaw, the inherent hypocrisy in all this. Pedro, the so-called vindicator, always acted as judge, jury, and executioner. He denied his victims the most basic right to defense, the very right he himself exercised whenever he was in court.
He was both the prosecutor and the criminal.
Exactly, a complete contradiction wrapped in extreme violence.
Okay, so despite this overwhelming tally of murders, confirmed and claimed, and the nearly 400 years he accumulated in sentences, Pedro Matador eventually walked free.
He did.
And this is a point many people, especially outside Brazil, just don't understand. How does that happen? What's the legal context that allowed this serial killer to be released?
It really comes down to a crucial aspect of Brazilian penal law, particularly at the time he was first incarcerated. The law back then capped the maximum time any individual could actually serve in prison at 30 years.
30 years. Regardless of the sentence.
Regardless of the sentence, it didn't matter if you accumulated 100, 200, 400 years on paper. The maximum physical time you could be held for the aggregate of all crimes was 30 years. Now, that cap has since been raised to 40 years, but the 30-year rule applied to him for his initial convictions.
So even the 47 murders he committed inside prison, which kept adding theoretical years, they were eventually just swallowed by that maximum time cap.
Pretty much, yeah. The system, which was designed in theory to, encourage rehabilitation and prevent literal life sentences without parole, inadvertently created this scenario where a documented mass murderer could eventually walk free.
So when was he first released?
First release was in 2007. He'd served 34 years by then, the 30-year cap, plus some extra time, likely due to administrative issues or maybe good behavior calculations within that time frame. He moved to Fortaleza in Ceará.
But his first taste of freedom didn't last very long, did it?
No, it didn't. He was rearrested in 2011. This time, it was for crimes committed years earlier while he was still incarcerated, specifically things like modem rebellion and illegal possession of weapons inside prison.
So consequences finally caught up for some of the prison stuff.
Exactly. So he went back to serve another 7 years specifically for those offenses.
Which brings us to his final release.
Final release came in 2018. He was 64 years old by then, having spent a staggering total of 42 years of his life behind bars. And here we get the biggest, most unexpected pivot of his entire life, something truly difficult to reconcile with everything that came before.
What happened?
The ultimate hardened prison predator claimed conversion. Pedro Matador converted to evangelical Christianity.
Seriously?
Publicly stated he had repented for his violent past, and then he decided to turn his legacy of bloodshed into, of all things, a cautionary tale for the digital age.
He became a YouTuber.
A celebrity YouTuber, yeah. His channel was titled, get this, Pedro X Matador Calm Jesus, Pedro X Killer with Jesus.
You can't make this stuff up.
The sheer audacity of it just captured national attention. His channel blew up, gained hundreds of thousands of followers. It granted him this level of fame far beyond even his criminal notoriety.
And what was his message on this channel? The ex-killer with Jesus.
Well, it was direct and, you have to admit, probably powerful coming from him. Delivered with this gravelly conviction of a man who had seen and done it all, he warned young people repeatedly that crime is not a joke.
Won't go past the surface.
Exactly. He told them to look past the superficial allure of fame and money that crime seems to offer, because the root, the end result, is always, always prison and death, his words.
It's just such a profound shift. The serial killer becoming the moral authority figure online. He even had this code of conduct he shared, right? Mundane stuff.
Yeah, the contrast is just bizarre. After detailing some of the most shocking acts of violence imaginable, he transitioned to advising youths on very practical, almost quaint morality.
Like what?
Like, don't brick bus stops, respect your elders, don't lie to your parents about where you're going. He was genuinely attempting to sanitize his image and channel his, let's face it, terrifying influence into a positive warning.
Well, trying to rewrite his legacy.
Maybe. He insisted the life of a criminal is like making a deal with the devil. It gives with one hand and takes with the other.
And this digital fame, it just reinforced the global influence his story already had. Because it's well documented that his tale, the killer who only kills the guilty, it crossed continents way before YouTube.
Oh, absolutely. He was, without question, the documented real-life inspiration for Jeff Lindsay's book series and the hugely successful TV show Dexter.
Right.
The international media constantly called him the Brazilian Dexter, the serial killer operating outside the law, applying his own personalized, dark moral code to eliminate other murderers. His life proved that this concept wasn't just compelling fiction. It was a shocking reality, maybe reflecting some deep societal desperation for justice, any kind of justice.
For a man whose entire life was just this continuous cycle of violence and retribution, it feels almost inevitable, doesn't it? That his end would be equally dramatic and brutal.
Yeah, it does feel grimly predictable in hindsight.
He didn't get to live out his retirement quietly preaching repentance on YouTube.
No. He lived by violence, and ultimately he died by it. On March 5, 2023, at the age of 68, Pedro Matador was assassinated.
Where did I have?
Right back in Mogi das Cruzes, the very area where he'd first made his brutal name decades earlier by wiping out Botina's gang. He was outside a family member's home when the attackers struck.
And the attack itself, was it random?
No, it seems chillingly efficient. Suggests a calculated hit, not just some random street crime. The details investigators released are pretty stark.
What are they?
The sources recount that 2 masked men got out of a black car. They shot him 6 times. And then, just as a final brutal measure, almost a signature of the criminal underworld to ensure the job was done, they used a kitchen knife to slit his throat.
Got a definitive, professional, terrifying.
Exactly.
And there was a relative present during the attack.
There was. And the words the assailants reportedly said to her are just hauntingly casual. Really encapsulates the cold, transactional nature of that world.
What did they say?
They told the relative, basically, it's nothing to do with you, take your daughter and go inside. It was an execution, intended specifically for Pedro, carried out with ruthless, impersonal efficiency.
So the preliminary investigations, they immediately focused on his activities after his release, right? Even with the YouTube channel and the conversion talk.
That seems to be the prevailing theory, yeah. The investigation strongly pointed towards his death being related to his post-release attempts to, well, enforce his own version of neighborhood order again.
Still playing the vindicator?
It looks like it. Specifically, reports suggest he was trying to ban drug dealers, particularly those associated with the extremely powerful PCC faction, from operating near his family's neighborhood.
Okay, the PCC. Just for our listeners who might not be familiar, that's one of Brazil's most dominant, most ruthless organized crime factions, right?
Absolutely. They are huge, highly organized, and notoriously violent. And it seems Pedro Matador's decades-old reputation as a killer, even his newfound status as a YouTube celebrity, it proved utterly meaningless when he directly challenged the operational territory of the PCC.
His legend didn't protect him.
Not at all. In the end, the very criminal world he had hunted within for 42 years turned around and executed him. It proved, maybe, that his personal, individualized code of violence was ultimately no match for the organized, systemic violence of a modern mega-gang.
He died a victim of the exact same kind of street violence he'd spent his entire life, either committing or, claiming to police.
Yeah.
The cycle completed itself.
It really did. A violent end to a violent life. #tag outro.
So, the life of Pedro Rodrigues Filho, Pedro Matador. It's just a devastating portrait of violence that was clearly born from violence. He went from being a victim of horrific trauma to a self-proclaimed street avenger, then a ruthless prison predator, and finally, improbably, a repentant digital celebrity.
Yeah, a man who claimed consistently to kill only the guilty, acting as judge, jury, and executioner in places where the state seemingly could not, or perhaps would not, step in effectively.
And his story really does reflect a deep societal crisis, doesn't it? His popularity, especially his continued fame, even after his release and this bizarre conversion, it seems to stem from this widespread public belief, or maybe feeling, that the formal justice system is fundamentally broken, incapable of protecting the innocent or truly punishing the guilty.
It taps into that frustration, definitely. When the system seems to fail, people sometimes look for or even celebrate figures who bypass it no matter how brutal they are.
And so we leave you with this provocative thought to consider. When the state fails to deliver justice, figures like the Vindicator, like Pedro, inevitably seem to rise to fill that void. Does the existence and the undeniable popularity of a serial killer like Pedro Matador merely serve as a dark reflection of society's own failings? Or does his violent, almost predetermined end ultimately prove that even a strict, self-imposed code of vigilante justice is inherently unstable and ultimately unsustainable?